Good morning, Year 9. Welcome to this 15th lesson in this series of videos on Jekyll and Hyde. Today we're going to be going into quite a lot of detail on the theme of silence. So we're going to look at three separate components to this theme, which is silence in literature, silence as a mood, and silence in context. So let's get started with silence in literature. So wouldn't you think that literature depends on dialogue, the very opposite of silence? This might be the case for realist texts that want to provide as much information as possible so that readers become immersed in the real-world actions and discussions. However, in the case of Stevenson's text, silence is important. Rather than a realist work of fiction, Stevenson's novel is Gothic, meaning that it explores the dark realms of the natural and supernatural worlds. Silence functions as a tactic to make readers feel the potential horror of what is happening. Okay, so silence as a mood. The mood of a literary text is the atmosphere of the piece. How does the text feel? Authors create mood using vivid description. The mood of the text is decidedly ominous. One way that Stevenson creates this feeling is by withholding information. Not only is Hyde never described in detail, but it often seems like the characters choose silence, or at least discretion, over dialogue. Utterson in particular is defined by silence. Men who are usually loose-tongued love to sit practising for solitude, sobering their minds in the man's rich silence. In addition, Jekyll himself pleads with Utterson to respect my silence. The more the characters talk, of course, the more information that is revealed. By having his characters frequently walk in silence and even keeping them from communicating with one another, Stevenson ensures that the plot and action remain obscure. Thus, the mood of the text is ominous and foreboding. Readers often don't know what's happening because there is so little explanation from the characters. Okay, so let's put this into context. In the text, Jekyll develops the serum to transform himself into another person so that he can satiate his desires. Another word for satiates is kind of fulfills. This suggests that Jekyll feels his desires are suppressed in the Victorian society in which he lives. The Victorian period spanned the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901. The period has become associated with repression and conservative attitudes, although writers such as Michel Foucault have poked holes in this theory. Foucault argues instead that Victorians talked about their desires quite a lot. It's just that they set up institutions, hospitals, psychiatric offices, etc., as official spaces to have these discussions. As a professional doctor, Jekyll is part of a polite society. Thus, he cannot speak openly about the carnal desires that he has for violence and probably sex. He must remain silent in these public gatherings. Even his ostensible friends, Utterson and Lanyon, remain unaware of what Jekyll wants. Even more importantly, they don't know that Jekyll has been engaging in experiments that transform himself into another person. You can see in the text just how much the characters resist speaking to one another. Utterson and Enfield walked on again for a while in silence, and later Utterson again walked some way in silence. At one crucial point, Utterson and Enfield witness the first part of Jekyll's transformation. They are horrified, but rather than speak of the incident, they walked on, once more, in silence. Silence rules. In some sense, Jekyll's incapacity, or at least unwillingness to speak to his friends, leads to disaster. Hyde becomes uncontrollable, trampling over a young girl and murdering Sir Danvers Carow. Stevenson suggests that silence is pernicious. It makes people turn to potentially destructive alternatives. Fantastic. So just as you finish off your notes, I'm just going to give you a summary of our lesson. So Gothic novels, like Stevenson's, are often deliberately withheld information, rather than provide a lot of it, as is common in realist fiction. Thus, the mood or atmosphere becomes ominous. Readers don't know what's going on because the characters remain relatively silent, or at least reticent to speak to one another. Another reason that silence is a theme in the novel is contextual. Polite Victorian society did not speak of carnal desires in public, so Jekyll needed to find an outlet through the brutish violence of Hyde. Okay, well, thanks for listening, Year 9. I hope that was of some help to you. Make notes, ask questions, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.